technical issues, but we're almost there. Well, hello there, and thank you for being here. I know it's about lunchtime, so I really appreciate your attendance. We're going to start in a few seconds our panel discussion regarding digital twins, use cases, and solutions in healthcare. My name is Sevilay Hüsman Köke, and I'm the Head of Business Development for Health Industries at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I'm mainly dealing with thought leadership regarding all the famous buzzwords we're currently having, like new entrants, blockchain, artificial intelligence, just to name a few. And we've got the experts here who will go into details soon. Why is that important? Well, we all know that pretty much. All these innovations will change the whole healthcare ecosystem. We just had a panel discussion earlier, and you really dived into that. So what are we going to do in the next 50 minutes? I'm going to briefly introduce the panelists, then we will start our discussion and have 3 short keynotes. Then I will open the Q&A session in about 40 minutes. So please take your notes. Your questions are really appreciated and really important, just to make sure that you understand the context right, check back if we made a real impression over here. And after the Q&A session, we're going to wrap up our session. So, digital technologies, particularly in healthcare, are very much famous at the moment. And to prepare this panel discussion, I have commissioned a population survey, which will be launched tomorrow, World Diabetes Day. And one of the main questions in that population survey was, we asked the German population, do you know what a digital twin means? And guess what? 70% said no. This is not a big surprise, but after having explained the context, 70% said again that they think that this technology is a quite reasonable one, and especially really helpful for patients with diabetes. And talking about advantages, they said that therapies and picking the right medication are seen as the greatest advantage, and the biggest disadvantage, and I think that's not going to be a big surprise being in Germany, is that they all fear that data security is the most important problem. But as I said, in Germany it's not a big surprise. So this is just a little bit of setting. Let me quickly introduce our panelists today. So please welcome Sebastian Krollop. He's a partner at Deloitte and the industry lead for life sciences and healthcare. He's got over 20 years of experience in strategy and transformational projects. And I've seen that you've been a medical doctor and then moved into the consulting business. And he is also chair of the Worldwide Board of Directors of the Healthcare Information Management Systems Society, also shortened as HIMSS. I think you all know that. Then we have Timo Paulus, Philips Innovative Technologies. He's the director of Innovation and Business Development for the DACH area. He's responsible for research collaborations of Philips with clinical partners, and that mainly contains bringing the innovation Philips research is working on to the customers and partners at an early stage, and then also making sure that the customer feedback and expertise is being heard and incorporated in the project portfolio. Then we have Ital Bolliger, Dassault Systems. He's responsible for life science accounts in Central Europe and assisting those in their digital transformation. Looking at the medical devices sphere, system engineering, and in particular creating digital twins, has become a key topic, and Ital is looking forward to share recent use cases with us. Well, then we have Björn Peters from PTC. He started his career focusing on IT security and the secure shift of sensitive business processes and data into the cloud. And since January 2018, Björn is responsible for life science in Central Europe, where he's focusing on the benefits that the digital twin brings into the medical devices, pharmaceutical, and diagnostics environment. And then, on the very far left, or right from your side, we have Jeroen van den Hoven. This is my pronunciation, but you'll pick it up. He's a professor of ethics and technology at Delft University of Technology, and he was founder and until 2016 program chair of the Dutch Research Council on Responsible Innovation. It's a really fascinating area. And he is also the member of the TU Delft Blockchain Lab and also permanent member of the European Group on Ethics to the European Commission. So I think that will be interesting to get that kind of perspective into our discussion as well. Well, let's kick off the panel. And Sebastian, doing my prep for the panel, I came across an article with the headline, "Disruption is healthcare's new normal." And apparently, if you type healthcare and disruption into your search engine, you will find over 34 million hits. So nowadays, everybody's talking about digital twins as the new disruptive technology. And the question comes is, why now and not like 10 or 20 years ago?
So why now, not 10 or 20 years ago? I think the concept of using a twin, not a digital twin, but a twin, a model, a sandbox, a dummy, is probably as old as mankind, right? I mean, remember when Isaac Newton was sitting in 1600, whatever, 60, and describing what happens if you pick up an apple, turn it around and let it drop, it falls, right? Yeah. So it's always great to have a chance to see, am I right or am I wrong, to do some trial and error, especially if we want to change the environment, like taking away the air. So what happens if you drop this apple in a vacuum? So therefore, things like sandboxes has been a good model. Or just imagine you would be sitting in an Apollo 13 on the way to the moon, and you've got a problem. Houston, we've red problem, and your engineer will tell you, yeah, I think we can help you. You just have to cut the red cable, right? The red wire. Yeah, you don't want to have this eminence. You want to have a truth. And even if he would tell you, I've looked it up in your manual, it's not the blue one, it's the red one, you still would be saying, are you really sure? So it's great to have, hey, we checked it at the twin Starship. We can help you. You have to cut the black stuff. So therefore, models like using twins or using models is quite old. What's new right now is the technology. So we have sensors. We have the chance to storage data, to connect data. We have the Internet of Things, and we have this huge amount of data. And we are changing from eminence, I think it could be the blue wire, to evidence. We know it now because we have real-time, real models. And we can actually describe very complex processes just with a code. And that's awesome. And this is going to change when we transform this twin thing to healthcare. It's going to transform the whole way, the whole game of how we're looking at diagnostic and therapy.
So it's all a technological aspect that we have picked up speed in the past few years, and that has enabled us in healthcare to do things differently.
So like you just said, if you write down disruption and in healthcare, how many, 30,000 or whatever?
4 million, 34 million.
Or whatever. I'm not good with numbers, I'm sorry. I'm a doctor. No, just kidding. So anyway, so right now the problem is, yes, we have great technology out there. We have virtual reality, AR, we have gene sequencing, we have the CAR-T, immunotherapy, we have 3D printing, but these are all silos. Yeah? The electronic health record, it's there, but it's still in a silo. And in order to change the way of how we look at diagnostic, especially at therapy, we have to connect these silos. We have to connect this knowledge, this data, and again bring it from an eminence to an evidence. Use deep learning, artificial intelligence to understand patterns. I want to give you one example. If you're, let's say, Sebastian, me, I would have an illness, and the benchmark therapy would tell me probably, the risk or probably the probability of you getting healthy again is very high, but there's still a tiny little chance, let's say 0.5% of the patients who will treated by this benchmark therapy will get severe complications, like death. Now today that's a fair chance, right? As a doctor, I would tell you, okay, let's close our eyes and let's just knock on wood and let's hope you're in the 99.5%, not in the 0.5. But if it's you or your family, things will change. And with a digital twin, hopefully one day we will be able to understand what's going to happen with you, Sebastian, on a very individual, very private, very emotional base, but on a very evidence-driven. To understand the reasons why I would be in this 0.05% severe complication, and then to mitigate that, to work around, to understand why is the reason, and to change the therapy. And again, this is, if it's going to happen, we don't know. If we find this super platform where we connect the silos and build really human digital twins, it's not scary, because everybody will say, oh, it's scary. No, it's not. It will really drive value.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So Timo, you are leading large research projects with Philips and thinking about meaningful use cases for the digital twin concept. Could you share some insights regarding medical devices and the patient care? Because what we need to be careful when we talk about digital twins is that we need to separate, are we talking about a machine and a twin of a machine, or are we talking about a person, a patient, where we have the twin of it?
Yeah, of course. So as you just asked, and also as Sebastian already has alluded to, the digital twin concept, or the twin concept, originally came from the fact that you wanted to model a device. A Starship is a very complicated device, but you can of course also model simpler devices. Also quite complicated device, as an example to your question, could be an MR machine. So there's a lot of sensors and measurements that we can perform on our MR machines. Really measurements not on clinical data, but on machine data. So temperature, gradient quality, and all these things. They can be monitored real time. They can be transferred to us, and we can run models on these data. And with the knowledge, because there's one thing is data. What you need next is a model that makes sense out of that data. Just having data isn't sufficient. No artificial intelligence algorithm is going to tell you anything if you don't have the knowledge and understanding of the machine that you need to feed in. So the next level is the models and the knowledge of the engineers that build the machines. And with these three components combined, we can make predictions on what's going to happen with that machine. And that can lead, for instance, to the case that you can predict a failure of a system in advance before it's happening. And that has a great benefit for the hospital and also, of course, for the patient, because you can replace these components before an error occurs. You can do that at times where it doesn't impact the hospital. You can do it in night shifts, for instance. And I said it also has benefits for the patient. Of course, that's quite directly then the case, because it will happen when he's not reliant on the availability of such a machine. So that's one example for a digital twin concept for a machine. You also asked for patients. One example could be, or let's say the majority of examples nowadays probably is around cardiology. There's a lot of experience and knowledge on the physiology, anatomy of the human heart. Human heart. And what we did in Philips is we built, based on ultrasound images of hearts, thousands of images, we built a digital model of the heart that depicts anatomy, morphology, but also function. Because if you know the function, if you know the anatomy, you know how the heart is pumping, you can derive parameters like blood flow, like pressure, and so on and so forth. That creates your model. And then in the next step, you have the images of an individual patient. It's going back to what you said, Sebastian. It doesn't help, or the ideal state is not to know what a generic heart, how a generic heart behaves and how the majority of cases would end. It's really about what for you will happen based on your data. So you have your individual data, you have the models that have been developed over time from domain knowledge, medical domain knowledge, biophysical modeling, and all that together will allow you to make predictions on, if you take a look at your heart, combine it with a model, you will be in a very good position to know what's going to happen and what the best therapy for a particular patient will be.
Okay, thank you. Dassault System is specialized in digital twin software, as far as I understood. So if you look at other industries like aerospace and automotive, we had just some examples here. They have been working on this topic for years now. We had an example of the Apollo 13. And compared to life science, it has just recently begun to be on their agenda. So from your perspective, what has led to that change? So why are we picking up late?
Yes, it's a very good question. We were discussing this just a few minutes as well. We see that the complexity of medical device business has increased tremendously over the last couple of years. May it be the interaction between mechanical parts, software, electronics, may it be the regulations that increased over years. The quality is, let's say, something fixed that you need to provide anyway. So in order to market instruments in a reasonable time at reasonable costs, which is also a parameter that needs to be optimized again and again, you need to understand the complexity of the system to, at the end, validate and experience the instrument in a virtual world and answer the question, will it perform as I would like it to be performed before it's actually built in reality. And in order to do so, the virtual twin is obviously one of the key approaches to somehow avoid mistakes that you do not want to make in reality, but rather in a virtual environment where it's quick and at low cost.
Okay, so cost is a pressure on that area as well. Björn, so we had a nice chat before the panel, and you said that some digital twins are also going artificial intelligence and virtual reality. Can you share with us that how visualizing the data with augmented reality can actually improve patient care, so healthcare as such?
Yes, sure, with pleasure. So, first of all, I have to say that the potentials are so huge that it's not easy to say where to start and where to stop giving examples. And what I would like to say and underline that we heard that data is key and very, very elementally for having improved health and patient care and everything. And as you know that the human being loves to see with its eyes, it's a matter of bringing this data, this valuable data, as seamless as possible into the real world. And this is where the potential and the power of augmented reality kicks in. So I could give you many examples. If you talk to a site manager of a pharma company or a whatever medical device manufacturer, he would be, I think, crazy about having augmented reality applications in the shop floor. Yeah? Maybe guided service applications or education, trainings, whatever. Hospitals will definitely also benefit when you, for example, plan a surgery room, or if you do trainings with doctors as well, or there are many things. If you manufacture medical devices, then you have also, again, use cases around services. I brought some examples with me in my short presentation. So there's a lot of potentials here.
Okay, thank you. Jeroen, a digital self for each person from birth onwards, reacting and predicting my health status. We just had, Sebastian said that could sound a bit scary. So what kind of ethical frameworks are substantial actually to make this work, that we can have a digital twin?
Let me first, I'm always put in this, the role of addressing all the scary issues, which I'm perfectly all right in doing. But I also want to point out that I agree with all the previous speakers that these technologies are fascinating, and they open up so many opportunities to help people and to improve their health. That is clear. But we want to move this forward in such a way that everyone can trust the new technology and has great confidence in it and will actually engage with the technology. And this is also the approach of the European Commission. I'm not representing European Commission this time, so I'm speaking for myself, but I'm just giving you the gist of what Brussels thinks about these things. We want to seize the opportunities, but we also want to prevent all the downsides and the negative sides. And now coming to the scary part. The first thing that people worry about is, of course, it is personal information. Just before we started, we had this debate about what's so different between modeling a windmill park or an engine or a device, and these cases. Why does it give rise to so much discussion here? Well, it is personal data. It is information about. If it's all true what is claimed, it is my heart in a sense. Yeah. And therefore I care about where it is stored, who has access to it, and how the information can be used. Will it always be to my advantage, or will people make some money out of it that is not shared with me? All of these questions become really important once you talk about technology that is really powerful and potentially beneficial. Then the question immediately arises, if it's so good, who has access to it and who will reap the benefits? How can we design a framework, a governance framework, a regulatory framework where we can have the benefits but preventing these negative consequences for the European citizens or the citizens wherever they are? Yeah. So, but privacy, of course, reliability of the technology, is it accurate? We're intervening on the basis of this, this digital twin actually doing things to people. We're taking decisions on them, whether it's blue cables or red cables or whatever. It may affect people further downstream. So there are the equality, justice, and fairness issues. So I think these are hugely important. There are also deeper conceptual questions to do, for example, with cure, care, and enhancement. So in an engine, for example, you could say, I have a model of an engine. I can predict whether when it's going to break down, but I can also see opportunities to improve its functioning. So beyond its normal standard function for which it has been designed. So then you start to look at, if we're looking at a personalized heart, I could run a marathon while you have this heart of mine, and you have real-time big data that I'm producing during the marathon. So would that qualify as drugs or kind of an unfair competition? But it certainly would help me a lot.
Probably. Well, thank you. I would like to now kick off the brief keynotes our panelists have prepared. And Timo, I would like to hand over to you, and you will share Philip's point of view. So let's try to keep it a bit shorter because we started later, but I think, here they are.
Okay.
Here they are. Fantastic. Thank you.
Sebastian is a former colleague, so he knows some of the slides. In the recent years, Philips has transitioned to a 100% healthcare company, and as such, we're looking at healthcare in a holistic way. And what you see on the top, that's what we call the health continuum. So we are looking not only at, or we don't start looking when a patient has developed a condition, an illness, but we start looking at healthy living at home, prevention, then diagnosis, treatment, and also in the end, then living back home, but potentially with a chronic condition. Now, as Sebastian also mentioned earlier, it's very important to integrate all the data that you acquire during such a journey or such a health event. You cannot do this in silos. You can't just take a look at, let's say, your blood pressure data and do a diagnosis based on that, and then you look at your CT and you make a diagnosis based on that. You need to integrate everything. And you also need to integrate it not only from different measurement types, but also through the entire longitudinal time frame. So, in order to do that, you need primarily software to help you, and one such IT construct to do this is exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about the digital twin concept, as also became clear a little bit earlier in all the answers so far. So if you now look at a kind of architectural level to understand what makes a digital twin, so there are 4 layers, starting from the lowest one, which is the data layer. This is where you really acquire, accumulate, and store all the data that you have acquired for an individual patient. But as I said earlier, that doesn't suffice. You need to be able to make sense out of that data, and that's what comes in the next layer, where you talk about different models. These can be artificial intelligence-driven models. It can be biophysical models of, for instance, the heart. You know how it pumps. You know the physics behind hydrodynamics. It's a very complex field. You know about clinical disease states and so on and so forth. So that's all integrated in this model layer. And then on the next level, this is exactly what Björn was saying earlier. If you have that data and if you derive a therapy, for instance, from that, you still need to be able to translate that so that the people involved, the patients and the caregivers, can make sense out of it. So you need to have an interaction layer, a visualization layer that can be VR and AR. It can also be, let's say, more classical ways of visualizing data. Sorry, got stuck here. But that's a very, very important aspect of the digital twin concept as well. And then finally, on top, you have the real world, where in the first place you take the data from, but then, of course, where also the consequences of what you do based on the predictions of your digital twin will manifest. Mm-hmm. So why do we do that? And what do we think? Why is it important to have such a concept? There are 4 main points. One is that the whole concept will allow you to get to the data, to analyze the data in a simpler way. It's very convenient to have a model where you can play around with, you can do your simulations, and then have a prediction. It's much faster, and in case of healthcare, the only way to really experiment with all that data. The second thing that has also been mentioned before is you want to reduce cost. Today is driven by a shift from volume-based healthcare to value-based healthcare, and the digital twin concept can help make that reality. Third and very important aspect is, of course, you want to improve clinical outcomes for the patients. And finally, you also want to improve the experience that the patient undergoes, but also that the caregivers undergo. It needs to be a very easy to experience, very user-friendly way how these things can be, how these concepts can be used in everyday's routine. And finally, just one example which people probably not widely would see in the context of digital twin, but if you look at the definitions that we just talked about, it really fits that scheme quite well. And I'm talking about radiotherapy planning. So what do? You have a patient that should undergo radiotherapy. You take a lot of images from this patient, and then that consists your data layer. In that particular example, it's a limited set of data. And in the next step, you have models on the physics. How does beam of ionizing radiation transfers through tissue? Or you have your physical model of the linear accelerator. How does the beam collimate? Which parameters can you tune to have a better effect? This is the physical models. And then you have biological models. What happens if ionizing radiation hits tissue? How does it kill cancer cells? What does it do with healthy tissue? And so on and so forth. So this shows a little bit the complexity of the number of models involved. And based on these models, you calculate a plan, the optimal plan. Now, another very important aspect of digital twin is, of course, that it's a dynamic system. It's not just one point in time, you look at it, you make a prediction, done, but you continuously need to update that plan based on new available data. And that's what you see in the last step here. What you do in radiotherapy, in fractionized radiotherapy, you do repeat imaging. And based on this new information, you update your plan, you go back to the second stage, and then continuously improve with the aims that I just mentioned on the slide before. I think with that, I'll stop here, and I think we may have time to discuss more use cases in the remainder of the session.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. We talked about examples of other industries before, Ital, and you also have prepared 2 or 3 slides to share some more insights of the benefits of using digital twins. So I'm hoping that we'll have the slides up in a moment. Yes, here we go.
Yes, I'm actually glad about your introduction when you said 70% of the people asked on the street could not answer the question, what is a digital twin? Yeah. So I brought a few examples and inspirations also from other industries that show the different aspects or the different potential faces, if you want, of a digital twin, with some examples on the upper left from a medical device where we want to find out on one side whether it behaves the way it should, whether it delivers the output that whatever company is producing the medical device promised to their clients, and also to, let's say, avoid a certain level of or a certain amount of physical prototyping. Especially in the medical device segment, that's a critical factor, that physical prototyping is extremely time-consuming and expensive. So if you are able to decrease the number of physical prototypes by X amount, we already gain a lot. Another example is then top middle, a very large complex system like a city, where we modeled a future scenario of Singapore, how it could look like in 20 years from now, where we want to see if the mobility concept is still feasible in this future city that does not exist yet, whether the air circulation through the buildings is still good, or if there will be any hotspots in the city that we don't want to have. So really experience these things that do not exist yet to a very detailed level then at the end. On the top right, we take then the digital twin into manufacturing, where we want to find out, so if we are ready with the product, will the assembly lines perform and deliver the output that we need in order to deliver X amount of products per year. And on the middle bottom, we see then what we also heard earlier, the interaction between the virtual representation of the product and the real product that exists in reality, and the data interaction between the real world and the virtual world. So a little bit of history. We noticed as a software company, we were good in CAD, maybe I need to mention, Dassault Systèmes makes software to design, simulate, construct, manufacture things like airplanes, medical devices, whatsoever. And we noticed 10 years ago that the complexity of today's business is increasing so dramatically that even for us as a software provider, it's challenging to somehow manage this complexity. And why is that? Because there are more disciplines that need to be connected. We need to connect the dots to see how things are related, how they are connected, how dependencies are, impacts. So for instance, if I change my instrument on a little bit on that side, what's the implication for regulatory compliance? What's the implication for, can it still be manufactured? Do I run out of budget and time if I change something? So we want to be able to do an impact analysis of these increasingly complex systems. And for that, we were not able to do that anymore. So we had to completely redesign our software and achieve two things. One is to go from what we called electronic, file-based, to a truly digital environment where we can connect the dots and connect mechanical with electrical, with software, with requirements, with regulatory inputs, etc., and really better understand our product then in the future. And this, of course, allows us then also to better involve the entire ecosystem, because everybody is looking on the same object, if you will, and is contributing onto the same object. Maybe somebody from design, maybe somebody from manufacturing, maybe somebody from regulatory, from marketing, etc. Everybody is looking on the same object. And so if we are able to connect the dots better and understand what we're doing better and understand the impacts better, there are some obvious, let's say, improvements that we will achieve. Of course, manage complexity is one. But drive innovation is another one, because everybody is working on the same thing. Everybody can work at the same time on the same thing. The manufacturer can already prepare the production line while the engineers are still developing the products, etc. We can market more reliable products because, as I said, we are able to virtually validate them before they are brought to market. And as we achieve a better end-to-end continuity, we will also be able to reduce the entire development cycle then at the end.
Okay, thank you. It's always good to have some examples also ready. And Björn, you did some bring some examples for digital twins.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay.
There we go.
So first of all, so a little bit just crisp, because we don't have so much time. PTC is a Boston headquartered software firm. We're doing about 1.16 billion of US dollars revenues, Nasdaq listed, and we also, let's say, help our customers to reinvent the way how they design, manufacture, operate, service, and sell their products in a connected world. And maybe some of you know our CEO, Jim Heppelmann. He published several nice articles around that in the Harvard Business Review. The German version is this Harvard Business Manager, together with Michael Porter. An example one that was in 2014, where it was about how smart connected products are transforming competition, and another one is really how you can bridge digital and physical world with a strategy around augmented reality. Is very interesting stuff there. And having said that, so we are focusing completely on things like smart connected products, medical devices. I have some examples. Connected operations, or other things like, let's say, the trends that go to a more, let's say, personalized medical care services out there to and then there we see that therefore is a rethinking is necessary in the life science industry, and in this rethinking the digital twin, from my point of view, plays an important part. And I just brought some examples here, but more visual. For example, College Park is a long-term customer of us, and there the digital twin is really helping the patient and the company to collect data in the field, and then to compare it with the assumptions that you made before and with the simulations that you did. And Ital also mentioned already how important is simulation, and then we see really how this medical device is used, and then we can bring benefit back to the patient when we know how he really uses this device and where it's very helpful and where it's a little bit problem, and then of course you can improve your whole product life cycle and you improve the patient's life. Another thing is, here is an example of Sysmex. They are a leading company when it comes to in vitro diagnostic, and what they build is they built a augmented reality based case that is more around services, as I mentioned before. And what they could do is they could definitely decrease the mean time between repair visits. They could increase the first time fix rate and stuff like that. So there are many use cases, and then there's something that is more like, I wanted this as more like a, let's say, starting point for further discussions. At the end of the day, we are all a little bit dreaming, but also scary about, will the next digital twin really be the digital patient? And what can we make out of it? I'm talking with people, they are simulating digital patients for improving, let's say, implants and stuff like that. But are we already there, or what is the situation where we are? What do we have to take care of? Maybe what is not really a software thing, more ethical thing. This, I think, is very interesting to discuss today. I just wanted to give you a crisp overview what is possible. Together with Ital's examples, I think you have a good feeling. And then I just would love to start the discussion.
Absolutely, thank you. Thank you. Sebastian, you were saying that everything's in silos at the moment, and things need to come together. So who else do we need in terms of stakeholders to actually make this future model of a personal patient digital twin happen?
That's a good question. I think in the end, the only way if this wants to fly, it needs to be patient-centric. So there needs to be the demand of the user, of the patient, of maybe it's a client, maybe it's a customer, but it's for sure the patient in the end. So if this is going to work out, we have the same problem we were discussing with the blockchain. There's so many people at the table right now who are not driving any value tomorrow if this works out. So if you're talking to this typical MD, doctor, to typical hospital, to typical medical device company, they are probably at risk because in the end, if you really use that amount of data to drive value in a highly technology background, you don't need the normal GP or the normal pharmacy any longer, just for an example. So that's why they are not going to drive the discussion. So in the end, this is going to be a business model, to be honest. If the client, if the patient is saying, I want to have this, I want to have this. And that's why we believe probably the biggest wave or the biggest leverage will come actually from the tech giants, from the Amazons, from the Googles. Just imagine if the Amazon Prime will give you for another 50 euros a month some more insights from your health. So that's probably the biggest risk, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. So Jeroen, I can imagine that it is going to be a challenge to promote trust among all the stakeholders, like the policymakers, health professionals, patients, and industry partners, as Sebastian just mentioned.
Yeah.
So, any suggestions how this can be solved? This is very hypothetical, I know.
Fascinating cases, and that all seemed to go in the right direction until you brought up the frightening five, let's say. So if we have, instead of those companies with a very kind of solid background and always well known for trying to contribute significantly to healthcare, like Philips Medical, right? Now we have Facebook digital doubles, or a Google digital twin, moving into, as they do everywhere, of course, moving big time into the healthcare domain. And of course, as we know, they have quite different motives and different incentives, which is just for profit. They are there for profit and for the data. And you're already kind of moving into the data. You were once kind of hardware suppliers. You sold something to a hospital, and then they were the owners of the data. That what went on there was not your. Now you're moving into a data area, but these parties have been moving there in their big time, and they want to grab that healthcare market, as we know. So then we have this very strange combination of people who. The medical people have only one thing as their prime goal, which is to improve the health situation of the individual patient. And they will use and they will work together with private companies. But this is their single most important drive. And now we have people coming in only think about quarterly revenues. And we know where this is driving us, could be driving us. So I think if these things are really as promising as they seem to be now and have been presented, then we have a very important task and responsibility to create an environment, regulatory, not heavy regulatory necessarily, but a regulatory governance environment in which people can trust all the players who are moving into that space. And there's a very important distinction that is not made I think in German, but it's certainly not in Dutch, but it is made in English, between trust and confidence. And trust is what people want to have, and confidence is, we think you're an expert. You will do a great job. Your stuff is technically up to snuff. It will work, 100%. But trust has to do with your motives and your ulterior motives and your plans and whether they are financial or non-financial. So if people always at the end of the day want to be able to trust in the moral sense of the word, they will look at your stuff whether it's technically okay. So, and if you want to get trust, you will have to behave as a trustworthy player, which means that you are a moral player, which doesn't mean that you cannot make profits. No problem. People will accept that you will have to make profits, but they have to know that you're there to pursue that one, for them, very important goal, that is the improvement of the quality of healthcare, and in particular their health.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add to that,
Yeah.
if you want to be trusted along those lines, you will have to provide the evidence that goes with that,
Yeah.
right? And that is not showing that you're technically very good, because that's not what is at the table. What's at the table where you're morally trustworthy. Right? So if your plumber comes to fix your kitchen sink, you can have great confidence in him as a plumber, but will he steal your silverware in the kitchen drawer? That is a moral matter.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. I would like to open for questions if you have. Are there any from the audience? Yes? Ein Mikrofon klar. Would you like to get it, please? Can you please stand up, state your name, and the question, please? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Noya Chen. I'm doing my PhD now with EU 2020 project on IoT and healthcare. So currently, I'm doing my second minute in Philips. So just wondering, I heard this digital twin concept a lot of times now, but then I always have one question in mind because as a patient, you can collect a lot of data and create like a digital model for this patient, but you still don't know there are so many risks which may happen in the longer term, or even in, for example, a cancer patient goes through oncology, and then there could be like vomiting, and there could be like high fever. But how do you make sure like the digital twin can predict the risks coming? Maybe even like 5 years after treatment, how do you know if the implant in the heart will still work? And even for like on a larger scale, in a factory, in a city, how do you know like so many risks can happen? A flood can happen, a tornado can happen. So how do you know like the digital twin can predict, incorporate all these risk factors with limited amount of data we have today? That's
Okay, thank you. Who feels like answering that?
Well, to give a quick answer, that's not 100% possible. It's always a development process for sure. What we can do today, for instance, you mentioned stents, implants, for instance. What we can do there is predict the durability of those things. But we will not, for sure, not be able to predict any side effects that could occur in 10 years from now.
Maybe one another remark. So today, you have to decide between your options today. Today, you have to trust basically your doctor, right? And he might be a great doctor, but he might be just someone who has, had a bad week, couldn't sleep the last 24 hours, and today he's giving you some kind of advice. So what we are trying to do is take it from the eminence of asking one or two people, you're asking 3 doctors, you get 4 different advisors, to more evidence-based. And yes, nobody knows about the future, and we don't know about floods, but we know about the human body and about drugs and about the interaction, and to take it from knowing, trusting, and moral is important, like we heard before, but checking is also a good idea in these kind of areas. So it's not 100%, but it's getting in the right direction.
And maybe the question should not be, is it 100% or 80%, but the question should be, how much better do we get through modeling? So compared to the way we did it 10 years ago, and I think that increase is value a lot.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? No? Okay, I'll hand you back your microphone. So let's wrap it up. We're almost there. So Sebastian, from a personal twin for everyone, we just talked about it. If we fast forward 20 years, 2040, does this sound like reality for you? I'm just going to ask you all the final question to wrap up our panel.
So if I have to be back in 20 years and have to answer that question, no. So I think again, technology it's exponential right now.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing the last 2 or 3 years, is nothing what we're going to see the next 2 or 3 years up front. So there is a big chance to really drive the technology to a really value-driven healthcare system. And I think the digital twin will play a major role in that, yes.
Okay, thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank you. So Björn, unlocking business value and having a holistic approach are two of the benefits for customers. You also mentioned what are the best in class doing right at the moment? So what should we be focusing on or copy-paste maybe?
So I think what I would love to mention, maybe as some last words here, is and underline is when it comes down to, and this is also a little bit like what is the prerequisite for having digital twins. And what I see when I'm talking with customers and companies and prospects that I did the last days and weeks and months ago with digital officers or others, I think it's not only a technology question and data security and sensors and what platform or whatever. It's also a cultural question and a mindset. So I think what helps very much, and the success of this digital twin thing will rely on it very much, is can we also change our way how we are thinking? So for example, the company itself, there are some silos that we have to break them down. We have to accept kind of, let's say, trial and error, but of course not with the patient, but we have to set up speedboats, whatever, try things. We have to talk with competitors if it's for the best interest for the customer and for the patient. For example, there's this smart guy sitting there, working for a company. I know him by occasion, and he's working for a company very good at, let's say, working with artificial intelligence. And we have to partner. We have to partner. We have to be open-minded. The customer has to be open-minded. You have to break down silos. This is as much as impossible as it is to be, let's say, technically ready.
Okay. So Ital, we just said companies may be at different stages of maturity with digital twins. So we are sometimes in the beginning and maybe a little bit further. Which point should they consider first if they want to start with the digital twin topic?
Well, I would also agree with you. It's the technology is there.
Yeah.
But it needs not only a new culture, but maybe also a new skill set, because it's much more interdisciplinary. You need to understand how these silos that we want to connect, how they connect, and you need to understand the other silos, not to full extent, but at least you need to understand the interactions between the silos. So it's, I think part is use the technology that is already available, and part is how do you reorganize your company, your skills, in order to use that fantastic new world where you can explore new things in a way that you were never able to do that a few years ago.
Okay, thank you. And Jeroen, I watched a video of one of your talks where you say that ethics is not always the sand in the machine, but it can also be the grease to it. And I really like that analogy. And looking at digital twins, what will be the most significant issue we have to address first, from your point of view?
I think we already touched upon it, and I think for people to really embrace it and to start to engage with it and use it, and also to have trust in it in that moral sense among the patients and the population, is that these data issues are covered. And of course in Europe we are in a very good position because we have this regulatory installed base that we have been ridiculed for in the last 2 decades by people across the pond. But now, even the big tech is thinking, oh, that may be actually a favorable condition for business because people have some trust and they have some guarantees. So I think that is very important. But I think we will have much more debate to the extent that this technology will deliver on its promises. To that extent, we will see much more debate and discussion, also social discussion about it, because people will think about it as basically their twin, with which they identify and they also want to identify with. And then they have something to say about it, and they will. And everyone in this business should prepare for that, I think.
Absolutely. So Timo, Will it be happen? So, what is your vision on the digital twin?
Yeah, I think I agree with what has been said before. It's not a task that one individual or one individual company can do by its own. You need multidisciplinary teams. You need the physicians that know from their experience how various patients react to various treatments. You need the patients that actually want it as a first
Yes,
step.
of course.
If that's not there, then we
Don't
won't
need to
have
do
that panel anymore next year. From the technological side of things, I agree with the previous speakers. That's not the biggest risk, and we will be able to get better and better models of patients. We already have, as I said before, we have very good models of the heart. Next step would be maybe cardiovascular system. So we will increasingly grow the scope of the models, and that's also going back to your question. The model or the digital twin will only be as good as the model and the data. And as both will become better and better, I think we will come in, let's say, 10 years from now to quite complete digital patient. But the biggest challenge is really to get all the people that we need to get it done together and really drive it in a joint effort.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. It is a very complex concept as such, and as you just said, maybe in a few years' time when we are back here again, it might be our twins talking. We'll never know. I don't think that will be happen so fast, but surprises happened. So thank you very much for the audience for being here, and well, have a good day and enjoy the fair.